Way back in 2019, Astral Chain showed up with an in-your-face style that immediately caught people's attention, myself included. Yet for some reason I never got around to this embodiment of Platnium Games' platinum gaminess. Well, I finally corrected that and dove headfirst into this game. Having honestly forgotten everything about this game's marketing campaign and description, I went in fairly blind, and I think that was for the best. It's time to fire up our Legionis and review this game. When I said I didn't know anything about this game before jumping in, I honestly meant it. I was really taken aback by its theme. Futuristic anime cops in a character action game? Hell yeah, sign me up. It's such a niche theme that I personally have loved ever since I was a kid and saw anime like Pat Labor. Toss in some Power Ranger themes and good old Platinum's penchant for stylish action combat, and we got a game that checks a ton of personal boxes. Despite all of this, I had a good number of personal gripes with the game, but I'll get to those later. For all the awesome things that the game does, it has a number of annoying quirks that really irked me. Either way, it's time for more details. The general look of the game might be hit or miss for you depending on your tolerance for anime. The world and characters all look awesome in this style. It feels really mired in its design style choice, and if you've read or seen one of my reviews, you know I love games that go all in on a visual style. It does suffer a bit from some sameness in a few areas though. The various entries into the astral plane were a great treat at first, but began to wear out their welcome. The area is just visually the same across every traversal into it. Thankfully, the story will take you to several different areas across its chapters, but even those repeat sometimes, be it at different times of day. Also, the anime characters are more miss than hit for everyone that's not a major character. The create a character visuals for minor characters are a noticeable weak point in the presentation next to the story important ones. Where the game absolutely kills it though is the music. Music is such an important part of character action games that of course it has to nail it. There are some awesome boss themes in this game which really surprised me. And of course there are various themes for each area such as the main office or the heliport and more, which I really like.
Great, you're still with us. Sorry to leave everything up to you. But you're
that said, there is also the switch problem. While the game runs fine for the most part, there is some noticeable slowdown occasionally in more crazy areas. And as usual, the visual quality of the Switch can leave a lot to be desired at this point. I would have loved to see this smoothed out in a higher resolution version of this game, but I think the game holds up pretty well considering everything. The stylish look of the game really helps edge out the flaws in the presentation. The story is pretty interesting in my opinion, but that doesn't make it great. The futuristic cop concept is pretty neat and tosses in the ability to control experimental living weapons that you're tethered to. Yeah, I'm down for this. While the concept is grand, the story beats themselves are pretty basic and predictable. Much to my delight, the bombastic cutscenes that Platnium Games is known for really helped keep things going. They usually accent major fights or moments and left me wanting more. But outside of those situations, there's lots of static conveying of information between characters just standing face to face. Without giving too much away, its twist rarely surprised, but it never hindered my personal enjoyment of all the cheese. All the cool Saturday morning Power Ranger poses and badass Platnium Game style clashes and over-the-top encounters kept things fun. Also, the ending leaves a lot of room to explore in a sequel if they ever make one. While the story is a bit thin substance-wise, Astral Chain is a game with a surprising amount to do. Aside from the main story, there's a shocking number of side quests and objectives to tackle if you so choose. The sheer variety of them really conveyed the feeling that a lot of love and care went into the concept of this game. You are a police officer after all, but if you told me at a glance that this game had a huge number of side quests that involve you doing, well, police stuff, I'd think you were crazy. Side quests can include all kinds of simple tasks like escorting a lost guy to a restaurant, finding a cat, breaking up fights, catching petty thieves, and more. Considering all the insanity that's happening in this game, having side quests that are normal work was an interesting concept. You can also gather clues about the current situation. By talking to various people and doing side quests, you can gain keywords and information on topics. Sometimes the game will ask you what you learned about the situation, such as gathering info on a monster attack. It's a neat way to give context and information on the area, but doing them or not only affects your score, and it's not required to gather all the information, much to my delight. But once again, I'm a perpetual side quest hater, so I didn't actually like this aspect very much. The amount of freedom to do them or not is really great, but the way they're broken up kind of bothered me. Before the big main focus of a chapter begins, you're given time to roam and do these side quests in an area. And when you're ready, you can just go to the next major marker and get things started. It's fine this way, but it felt like it separated the game's elements into a strange place for me. Once major story elements kick in, all the side quests are over and it's time to focus down. I would have rather them be more ingrained into the major areas instead of separate, but I kind of don't hate it either. After a few chapters, I began skipping many of them instead of souring my own personal enjoyment, but I still finished the game with something like 65% of them completed. To sum it up, I'd say the structure they went for is bloated. The combat shines though. It's Platinum's trademark combat style of flashy combos and well-timed dodges. Mixing things up though is the Legion that you're commanding in tandem. With a press of a button, your Legion is summoned and begins attacking on its own. Certain attacks can be manually activated as well, but they generally do their own thing in this regard. The player mostly takes control over movement and positioning of the Legion to gain advantages in combat. Attacking from behind does extra damage, so pincer formations are beneficial. Wrapping the chain around an enemy binds them as well. There are also a handful of other techniques to unlock. You can also take control to complete a variety of functions in or out of combat. For example, the Sword Legion lets you do a guided slash attack. This is used for breaking barriers or signals in exploration segments. In combat, it's used to break links between enemies that are providing buffs. This mix of non-combat and combat uses for the various legions is pretty neat in my opinion, and it gives plenty of reasons to look around the world and experiment in fights. This style of gameplay was a whole lot more simple than something like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry than I was expecting, but that doesn't mean it's not without its own sauce. The basics are simple, but the game piles on a ton of mechanics with a nice sprinkling of added techniques as you level up. It definitely took me time to get used to this game's combat and to remember the variety of ways to exploit enemy weaknesses. However, the more I played, the more second nature it became. Being able to clothesline enemies that are charging went from difficult to something I could do with ease. But I'll have to echo what I said about the game's story content too. It felt a bit bloated at first. Astral Chain's combat is filled with a ton of interesting and unique concepts for fighting. They all work well together and are interesting, but the sheer amount of things I could do, and in some cases the things I had to do, were a bit overwhelming. As someone who loves when games ask you to really play them, I enjoyed it in this regard, but there was a definite hump at the beginning of the game. Like I said, I really enjoyed the flashy combat once I was pretty well into the game. The first hour reservations aside, it really comes together awesomely, especially once more abilities and attacks are unlocked. In all, Astral Chain is an interesting game. It's filled to the brim with stuff. It has lots of side quests, optional encounters, and things to unlock. I have nothing but praise in terms of content, but I can't get over my own personal feelings of wanting the game to be a bit tighter. The pacing feels very bloated and the combat options don't really come into their own soon enough. The main story beats got my personal interest with the bombastic action, but they're pulled down by the stiff, long-winded conversations explaining the details of what's happening. Personally, Astral Chain is a game that does a ton of things that I enjoy and love. The theme checked a ton of boxes in my personal, holy crap, I really love this list. But it almost equally does a ton of things on my list of things I don't really like. So if you want a game that has a surprising amount of content and playability, it's pretty high up there. But if you want a game that has more significant story moments over side content like me, you'll be left wanting. I enjoyed it, but only certain portions of the whole package. But that's gonna be it for this one. Astral Chain was released some time ago. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know down below in the comments. As usual, stay safe out there and have a wonderful day or evening. I hope to see you again for the next review.